talk about this morning about how adoption has impacted our lives, and in a word, radically. This is what our lives sort of look like, although not so dressed up usually. And I'm going to read off of this, so can I see it instead of you? Unless you want to read it. Do you want to read it? It will sound different. With a couple recently who was considering foster care and started telling some stories, and a few hours passed. And then when asked to do this, we realized we would probably need 7 or 9 or something hours to actually unpack kind of some of what adoption has meant in our lives. But to be shorter, we could tell some stories, of course, that are fun and silly and maybe even awkward, a lot of awkward. Or we could tell some gut-wrenching stories that would leave most of us in tears. But to us, adoption wasn't really our idea because God invented it. And so we thought when we were ready to start a family, we had our ways, right, of starting a family, and then God made, the very first month we thought we should start a family, God made a Kendrice. And the weird thing is we didn't get to meet her for 8 more years. But exactly 9 months after we wanted to start a family, Kendrice was born. So we thought that was pretty cool because it reminded us that adoption wasn't our idea. It was God's. And when Kendrice was 8 and Christopher was 5, I got to meet them at a residential home in Grand Rapids. And there was so much nervous energy and chatter and jumping on furniture. And I wanted to talk to Christopher. I wanted to get his attention for a second. So I put my hand on his forearm, just like this. Very serious. And he took my hand and he put it all the way down so that we were holding hands, and he looked me right in the eye. He was like 5 years old. See the dimples? Well, if he smiled, there would be dimples. But I looked right in his eyes and I knew he was our son. And it wasn't because, just a second, we're going to stand here nicely. It wasn't because adoption was our idea, it's because God put it in our hearts. And then came a day in December of 2015 when we started praying about who God would have be siblings for Kendrice and Christopher, because we thought maybe there were more kids that needed a home. And so we put up these empty picture frames on our wall and we started praying for them. And then 6 months later, we found out that that day we started praying was the day that Gabriel was so horribly abused that he almost lost his life. And so he was in the hospital for 10 days. And PJ coming to visit was the only thing, stand over here, okay, was the only thing that would bring him comfort. And so by the time we met them 6 months later, they had healed from some of their physical stuff, and actually, because of their foster home, they were more emotionally and mentally ready then to enter a family. And again, it just reminded us that adoption wasn't our idea, but it was what God used to rescue lives. So some parts of our story are happier than others, because we got to snuggle and meet a little 3-month-old baby named Ari, and she brought a lot of joy to our lives. We got to see a lot of her firsts, but by the time we thought she was going to go home to her biological family. And then some years passed. She became a Webster. And then we got to look back at all those special moments, because we got to have her the whole time. We got to see all her firsts, her teething and her crawling, and lots of giggles, right? And dancing and singing, because that's who Ari is. And it reminds us that really, actually, adopting a 5th child was also not our idea, but it was a special gift from God. And there's some parts of our story that are harder than others, because there was another 3-month-old baby named Jacob, and we got to witness a lot of his firsts. Hi. We got to watch him grow into a toddler. Do you see it there? And we got to send him home. And then he returned to us quite quickly that time. And we got to spend more years bonding, being silly, being a family, right? Just living normal family life. I know. I'm glad he told everybody, because they wouldn't have known I'm trying to hold him still.
I'm not still.
You can hold still, right? When he was 4 years old, we sent him home again. And there he lived some life, right?
Yeah.
Gained some experiences.
I played a lot of video games.
You played a lot of video games.
Never stopped.
We could stand here and tell a lot of stories about living at Mom's house, right? But that's not what we're going to talk about today. Today we're going to talk about this part. Look at Jacob. We met him when he was 3 months old, but we didn't get to adopt him until just this last February. We're right here in this courtroom, and in February, when he was 8.5 years old, we got to adopt Jacob. And during that whole time, for eight years, we got to hold our hands open, watch now, and our hearts open, and realize,
I like asking.
don't we? When we're in this courtroom, we both cry. Adoption, listen, look at this part. Adoption wasn't our idea. It wasn't ours to demand. It was God's to make available, right? And so in His time, in His leading, in His way, this is what God did. Or at least.
My turn. My hands will shake too. Ooh, not really.
Pretty rough.
All right. So I think you've all heard about our faith a little bit, but whether you believe in God or not, or have accepted His Son as your Lord, God has radically transformed my family, and God radically transforms all families. You see, God has a heart for orphans and adoption, and it's clearly displayed throughout the Bible. The theme of adoption serves not only as a strength in our faith, but also encourages us as we press towards the needs of all the orphans in Ottawa County. So here are some beautiful stories of adoption found in the Bible. In the book of Exodus contains a story about a Hebrew woman who had a son during the time when Pharaoh had ordered all Hebrew male infants to be put to death. Instead, she found a basket, waterproofed it, and placed her son inside and gently set him down the river. How hard would that have been? But not after long, one of Pharaoh's own daughters caught sight of the basket and retrieved the young boy. She eventually adopted him into the royal family and named him Moses, the same Moses who grew up to be an important leader, a prophet. You right, you sticker.
I can read for you.
That's okay. He became an important leader, a prophet, and a faithful servant of God. In the book of Esther, a girl named Esther who became an orphan following her parents' death. Unfortunately, Esther was adopted by her cousin. This cousin later became the queen. And today we can read about how God worked through Esther to bring deliverance to the Jewish people. In the New Testament, Jesus was conceived through the Holy Spirit and was adopted by his mother's husband. Joseph took Jesus as his own child, along with Mary, and raised a son who would change the course of history. In addition to physical adoption, the Bible also speaks about adoption in a spiritual sense. So as you read in Romans 8:15, it so beautifully states how for you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear. But you received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. God says we become part of His family in much the same way the family welcomes a new child. It's done out of love. Just as God adopts those who receive Christ into His spiritual family. There's so much love in this room today. And I'm glad that we share it with you all. Thank you.